All right, can everyone hear me? Hello? Well, thank you all for coming. We appreciate you guys taking the time out of your days to be here and learn a little bit about the renovation product. I'm Ian Perry. I'm with Primary Residential Mortgage. We're in Guilford, here in Guilford on the Green. I've been there about 17 years now, can't believe it. Some of the other sales team is around the office too. I know some of you are invited from different salespeople from the office. So again, we appreciate you joining us today. We have Greg Hall here. Greg is our head of our renovation department. He's actually based out of Maryland, and he took the drive up last night to come and kind of talk to us about the different renovation programs. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg, and yeah, it's kind of be just an open, he'll kind of talk to you about the program, ask questions whenever you have questions, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Well, so of course I can't get my pointer to work here. There we go. Now, all right. Thanks for coming, everybody. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to learn a little bit about renovation. I'm probably gonna be walking back and forth. And if anybody has any questions, you can stop and interrupt me at any time if you like. I usually try to run casual renovations when they come about. So today we're going to learn about increasing home buying and selling using opportunity of renovation mortgage. So not everybody understands what renovation even means, what it's about, and when it even comes in front of you. So hopefully you'll leave today understanding a little bit more how to follow up with that. So who I am. So my name is Greg Hall, was introduced, and I run the National Renovation Division for Primary, based out of Utah. I live in Maryland. Any renovation loan within our company has to go through our division. Only the renovation. Many of you will still work with Ian and their team. On their credit side, we work side by side to make sure that contractors are vetted, loan amounts are proper, things closed nicely, and in post-closing situation, we handle all of that as well. So today we're going to cover how to increase your business, how to create an open mind. That's what I mean about walking into a house and understanding when the renovation presents itself to you, how it actually can salvage a transaction, and why you really shouldn't be afraid of it. But what is renovation? It sounds like a stupid question. It's not new construction. Yes, you could add on square footage with it. Some people think that's new construction. It's not. We're basically doing any improvements involved with a home that's already existing. And the advantage of renovation financing is that you can, right here, subject to after improved value, we will give max financing as if that house was already complete. Let me just give you a quick example to make some sense of that. On a normal transaction, if you were to sell that house for $200,000 and let's say they're doing FHA financing, they would be able to borrow 96.5% of that $200,000. Say the same borrower is going to buy that $200,000 house, put $50,000 into it. We have a total acquisition cost of $250,000. That borrower can borrow 96.5% of $250,000 as if repairs were done. They close first and they do renovation after closing, which is huge because, well, refinance markets are huge. Not that that involves you guys, but it's huge, especially when you're dealing with that borrower that has that house they almost love. And we're going to get into that in just a little bit. Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Misconceptions of renovation. They never close. If they do, they're nightmare. They're way too expensive. They're going to ruin all relationships. I took this project over in 2014, and if they never closed and they were that nightmare, I wouldn't have a job today. I wouldn't have 2 kids in college. And it's a strange acquisition made, but it's just false. A lot of it basically is people are just scared of them. They don't understand. These last 2 years have been huge with low-hanging fruit. Yeah, my business was busy, but not as busy as the normal. Rates are dropping down to 2%. And in a perfect world, I'd want 800 school borrowers with 20% down and made $400,000 a year and buy, multi-million-dollar homes, but it's just not reality all the time. So that's when we turn to renovation. Let's just get down off of that ledge and go into more of a realistic market. Renovations used for challenges that come up into it. So let's just say that, I'm going to repeat this a little bit later on, but when you have needs and wants, and when needs present themselves, especially when you're dealing with an appraisal that comes back with repairs also that you weren't anticipating. In that particular situation, you have three options. That's it. First option is the most makes sense in your world. That would be if the seller decided, hey, I'm going to fix those repairs. We'll do a final inspection and we're going to close. Second, if the borrower is going to pay cash. A third, they have to do a renovation. That's all your options. So if you're not familiar with renovation financing, you almost are going to walk away from a transaction not realizing that you have one in front of you. That's actually probably my number one source of business that comes across our desk. People have they want to buy a particular home, they order an as-is appraisal, comes back subject to, they don't know what to do, especially if it's HUD owned, foreclosure, short sale, things like that. We'll get that a little bit later. But the biggest part that people don't realize, one of the best statistics I always spread around is over 50% of all the homes in the United States are over 30 years old. So there are tons and tons of homes out there to renovate. And excuse me, and right now, first-time home buyers obviously a big target everybody's finding because they never owned them at 2% interest rate or 3% interest rate that's out there. So they can't afford these homes that are sitting on the market at the rates that they are. They find dilapidated homes, fix them up, and here we are. This is an interesting slide I just threw in here this morning. I don't know how many people here understand how FHA works. And there's 4 HOCs, home ownership centers around the country. One in Philadelphia, Denver, Atlanta, and Santa Ana, California. Everyone here reports to the Philadelphia HOC. Now these numbers are a little skewed because it only shows renovation for 2 or 3K loans. But the reason I put this together, all the data you can find runs from 2007 to 2022. Well, I organized this by last year. The fiscal year ends in September. 2022, these top 5 here. Look at the areas. Newark, New Jersey, Hartford, Connecticut, Boston, Massachusetts, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, New York, New York. You guys are literally sitting in the middle of a hot spot for renovation financing anywhere in the entire country. The other Philadelphia HOC is also the largest HOC with more transactions. Now, a lot of that comes from this area on the East Coast. There are more homes here, a little older here, you know, so where everybody settled in the United States originally started. But stating that, these numbers here just kind of show, like Newark, New Jersey, 398 units in 2022. So that's just 2 or 3K units. I can tell you primary, we actually do more conventional renovation loans than we do 2 or 3K loans. So this number is a little skewed, but it gives you a good history. But I look at New Hartford, Connecticut, which is right down the street. Not only were they number 2 in 21-22, you guys have been in the top 3 since 2016 for renovation. So if you have not been participating in this program, you're losing transactions because others are taking them on. So one of my strengths here today is to really make you understand they're not impossible to do. They're really nothing you should be scared of. They're a lot easier than you probably think. It's just the unknown. So renovation, this screen, even though it's blank, is probably one of the most powerful screens here to understand what renovation financing is. When you look at a property, you have needs and you have wants. So you might have a borrower who wants to buy this house that needs this. They have to do that. They also want to buy a house that I want to do this. There's nothing wrong with it. They want to buy a house that needs, then they want to do some things. We'll combine those 2 together. It's how you put that particular puzzle together. So the needs, as I said earlier, not working, is that is their number 1 piece that would probably come across your desk. The wants are more of, hey, I have a borrower that's shopping for all these homes in this particular neighborhood. I really can't find one that I particularly like, but if I wanted to upgrade the kitchen, if I want to do appliances, I want to put hardwood floors in, then maybe I would think about buying this particular house. That's where renovation would kind of come in and take that over. So ultimately, as a real estate agent, I'm not saying you're going to think about renovation day and night 24/7, but if you run into a situation where you have a borrower that's having a hard time finding a home, you have to rethink of after improved, subject to. Yes, of course, the easy way, and the way we would all want to do it, is find a home that's going to be ready and it's shiny and pretty, and they're going to move right into it. But if you're bouncing around neighborhoods or even this market right now where there is no inventory, you might find more inventory of some dilapidated homes that can also help you turn that sale over. Overcoming problems associated with good bones, with bad skin. That's a big thing. How do you make something old look good? Especially from the previous slide, when you had 50% of the market that was built over 30 years ago. You don't have sellers in there that are upgrading their house. This is all they do. So what type of products and properties do we offer on here? So right now we have two different types of renovation programs. We got FHA 2 and 3K. We have the Fannie Mae home style. Obviously, it's an FHA borrower or a conventional borrower. The one big difference you'll find with Fannie Mae is that you can offer primary residence, second homes, or investment properties. Now, investment properties, be warned, because you are limited to a 1-unit property, but you can go to 85% on that property. Where the other properties you can take on 1 to 4 units, just like any other transaction. So one thing, I don't want to get ahead of myself, depending upon my slide. These type of programs here, I'm sorry, these type of eligible properties are no different than anything you're going to find in your normal day-to-day. The renovation is just an add-on piece. I want to buy this particular property, but I want to add on here. So second homes are huge. I don't know, I think it's Rhode Island, one of the big vacation spots around here. So a lot of times people may live here, they want to buy a second home in Rhode Island. That's fine. They can make an investment property if they want to. I'm just trying to give you an example. But the initial interview is, what do we want? What are we looking for? Again, I'm going to continue to bring up this needs versus wants, because that's where your job is to your client when you're understanding, like, what do you want? What are the needs this particular house has? How much do you want to spend? How long do you want to be in the home? These are the kind of questions that we would ask in financing, because depending upon if someone wants to stay in this house for the rest of their life, it's going to be a little bit different financing. If somebody wants to jump in this house, they're going to jump out in a couple of years. Maybe they have a job here for a couple of years, but they don't want to rent a place or things. Depending upon what they want to change the direction. Why am I explaining all this to you right now? Is because with our job and the renovation itself, it's the puzzle of where are you today? Where are you going? Depending upon the house structure and your credit profile, that's really going to determine what type of financing you're going to do. So I don't want to go into crazy specifics on how every little guideline on FHA 2 or 3K renovation loan is compared to a Fannie Mae home style or a Freddie Mac choice renovation loan, because honestly, you could have a borrower who is a conventional type borrower, but believe it or not, that FHA loan might be a better product for them depending upon their lifestyle. Just knowing that we have the option to cover everything around. Does anybody have any questions right now? You need me to slow down. You tell me to slow down too. Sometimes I get a little hyper. Talk about this all day, 24/7. So let's jump to the contractor and the players inside any type of loan. You have your normal, you have your real estate agent, you got your loan officer, you have your title company. None of that goes away. Everything's exactly the same. The contractor is one of the new players that come in there. Why they're so important. The contractor really is stepping in after that loan closes. What do we need? We get this all the time. What do you need? Let me give you an example. So you got a borrower that wants to buy a house. They want to do whatever, $50,000 worth of renovations. What type of renovations? Well, we got to get a contractor out there to figure out what they want. We don't even know the needs yet. We're just looking at a property. I don't even need to know an exact bid before I run numbers. But they're going to have to find a contractor that we're going to approve. And it's really not hard what they're trying to do. They go online, they fill out a registration form. We see a copy of their license, their W-9. They'll give us their general liability insurance, which is usually minimum of $1 million. Sounds like a lot, but that's pretty normal for contractors. A workers' comp insurance. If not, they have an exemption form. And they just got to agree to the post-close draw schedule, depending upon how their cash flow is. There's some contractors that may say they're all I'm in. When they figure out, like, you're gonna get a material draw, but then you have the front X before you get payback X. Some of them are like, my pockets aren't that deep, I can't fund that project. So we need to find that kind of stuff out up front to make sure everything goes smooth. I got a question earlier, Nick asked, what happens, like, who can be a contractor? What, can a borrower be a contractor? What if they have family members? So we do not allow self-help, meaning our clients, our borrowers cannot be the contractor on record. I don't want to suggest this, but we don't care who's swinging hammers. I'm not, knocking on their door, give me your license, oh, you're the borrower, get out. If the borrower is a contractor and they have a buddy or a friend who is also a contractor and they're willing to be the contractor on record, that's fine. They can do it. They can sub it out and the borrower can do the work all day long. But they need to understand if something goes south or somebody walks off the job or it's your contractor, it's your buddy who's 100% liable for what's going on there, not the borrower. We don't want to sue our borrower, so we're going to sue their friend. The question I got earlier is, well, what happens if my borrower wants to buy a house with the father owns a construction company? Can we use them? Absolutely. As long as the father's not a co-borrower on the house, or the borrower is not a contractor for the father, like they could work for them if they want to, but it has to be like a secretarial position, HR, something like that, to show you're not the contractor that's there on record. So contractors will make or break transaction. I cannot stress having a good contractor. There's a lot of these, and I don't want to say like that. No, we need handyman, people running around, they're great. But sometimes when you have a $150,000 renovation project, and I have Jack Handyman's service coming to me, I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be the job for you. We don't want to take any money out of your pocket, but can you fund this project? So what's going to happen? They'll say yes, and then they'll close. They don't have any money, and the first person they call is you as an agent, or they call Ian as a loan officer, and then we got to fire him, find a new one, and it just turns into
I have a question.
Sure.
So do you keep, when the contractor gets through that approval process, do the names all show up on a database somewhere?
Yes.
Area?
Technically, it does. So we keep record of everybody we use, even all the way down to what type of project that they're doing. We have our favorites. We can't go to a client and say, hey, you have to use this contractor because they're great. But we will say, here's a handful of a couple contractors we use in your area. Sometimes I can't because there's some areas I've never worked in. So I'm like, go to Google contractors and find out where they are. But if we worked in there, we have some good ones that say they know what they're doing, but you have to choose for yourself. Got all kinds of questions.
Yeah, so what if you hired a contractor and all that met, but in between the work job, there's some way there's not forwarding a job or it's not pursuing, like
Yep.
finishing a job. Can you fire a contractor in the
You can.
middle of the job?
You
And how does
can,
that,
and that can be complicated. We do it all the time, unfortunately. But what happens is, so the question was, we have a contractor that we vetted, they go on site, they start the work, and all of a sudden they don't show up. And the borrower is frustrated, we found a new contractor, what happens? So you have to get out with the old before you can bring in the new. And this is where things can get a little shaky, depending upon if all parties like each other and how it works out. The contractor has to agree to say, yep, I did this work, I got paid 100% for everything that I've done. They're gonna sign a lien release and they're gonna walk. Once that happens, a new contractor goes through the same vetting process. Usually this is already done prior. I'm gonna say, congratulations, you're the new contractor. There's X amount of dollars in this renovation escrow account, and you have to be able to finish the scope of work. You gotta remember, I haven't really gone over yet, the scope of work. When we're doing these loans and we have a sales contract, we have the bid, and we're handing it over to the appraiser to give us a value. That appraisal is subject to those repairs. So as a lender, we're going upside down in the beginning because we're like, hey, we're gonna give you money for something that doesn't exist. Your house is not worth X until all the work is done. So in this situation, work's not done, contractor walks, the house technically isn't worth that amount of money. We have to make sure there's enough in the escrow. Take that over.
and then how long does that process take? For example, when you fire a contractor and get a new one?
Oh, it can happen in 24 hours if everybody's on the ball. Your nightmare is Contractor one says, no, I haven't been paid 100% for everything I've done. So now we're like, not attorneys, we're just a bank. We'll help you to a certain degree, but you guys have to litigate that yourself and figure it out. So it's really important to get a contractor that everybody likes, is going to get the job done, that has deep pockets and show up.
So, one of my kids did a, 203K loan, and there was a, independent individual that was required to bless the renovations,
Okay,
pricing, et cetera. Is that,
this guy, HUD consultant.
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, perfect segue. Didn't set that up. Perfect. Yeah.
So, but the person who did it was not very good.
That
So-
happens too. So we have had, what she's talking about is a HUD consultant.
Mhm.
If you do a 203K standard loan, think of that. Any product can have a HUD consultant. I'm gonna explain what the person role is. If you're doing a 203, an FHA 203K standard loan, not a limited, a standard, you have to have a consultant. Most HUD consultants, really good HUD consultants, are typically home inspectors as well. And the ones that we find that, there's a lot of times that you may hire a home inspector to go into a house. They may walk in as an inspector and walk out a consultant and say, there's no way you're getting traditional financing on this house. Like, I have to turn this to a renovation loan. So what a HUD consultant does is they, as a lender, will hire the consultant. I actually hire every consultant. We ran into some problems when volume was stepping up. Every consultant's not created equal like contractors. There's some really bad ones out there. So I myself find you a consultant. I go through a vetting process. I search for them. I find out if they're home inspectors. That's how I typically fall them down. Now, through time, I have enough built now in certain areas that I'm like, yeah, he's building, this guy's great. But what they do is, so they'll meet with your client in the very beginning, and they go through all of your needs and your wants. They should be able to tell you for FHA guidelines, what minimal property requirements you need. They're going to give you, let's call it a work write-up that will give you a really high value. So I always tell your borrowers, don't freak out when you see it, because their job is to say, this is the max amount this project should cost. Your contractor should give you a bid matched on what I gave them, and their costs usually are going to be lower. If there's any line items that are higher, I'm going to talk about it. And in this last few years with material costs going, that's fluctuated a little bit. Even though we hire the consultant and borrower pays for him, he's really working for the buyer and protecting them. So they're doing all the inspections. So every time it's an inspection, meaning the contractor goes out, starts swinging hammers, does X amount of work, is ready to get paid. So it's a draw inspection. So they'll call the consultant, he goes out, he inspects the work. And then we'll prepare all the document, we submit it to us and say, yep, I'm gonna check for $12,463, whatever is ever owed. And that can go up to 5 inspections before the final inspection is complete. So yes, you are correct. Not every consultant, I actually just fired one in Arkansas last week and had to another one because he was terrible. Luckily, we didn't really get going on the job. So again, the contractor is probably the most important person that we vet. Consultant, if we need one, is the second most. On conventional renovation, we don't need a consultant. You can hire one if you'd like to, but it kind of comes out of their pocket. They just want that peace of mind. Usually that's why we're a little bit harder on contractors with conventional financing, renovation financing, because they're the ones that are doing all the paperwork, and we're going to hire like an appraiser or somebody to go out and do the inspection, not the consultant. Any other questions? That one over.
What does your post-load documentation, what does that mean for contractor? Is it just getting paid at the end when you close, or?
Yep. So we have a third-party company that we hire, and what happens is this, after the loan closes, the bid goes into this computer system and we sort it out in a big bank spreadsheet. And it's a 35-point spread depending on roof, doors, windows, whatever the kitchen, whatever how the money is allocated out. So when your contractor says finishes the kitchen is $10,000, they'll be like, okay, I finished my kitchen, I need an inspection done, they come out. Now the paperwork is really just pictures and, they just kind of show and break down what's done. There are some disclosures either from Fannie Mae or FHA that all parties have to sign. Your borrower is involved all this as well. Once all that is done, it submits to us. We goes to our servicing department, they sign off on it. The big checkbook is balanced, the big spreadsheet is balanced, and then we get FedEx overnight the payment. Typically, payments are paid to contractor and borrower, and they'll both endorse the check, kind of shows proof that they're all agreeing to the money that goes. There are times where borrowers like that send to my contractor, they'll have it ready. I don't need to sign the check. That's okay. So sometimes you have some sneaky contractors that'll say, send me the check, borrower, there's nothing about it, and they're trying to skim some money through that way. Any other questions? All right, we'll move on. Does my buyer qualify? Hold on, before I go back, I wanted to mention one other thing. Really more for contractors. When we're building out, because I didn't do a slide today. Because I don't think I did, it breaks down an actual renovation escrow, but there is a big sum of money that you're gonna see sometimes if there's people back, called a contingency reserve. So if you have a $50,000 project, we're going to collect 10% for a contingency reserve of that $50,000. $5,000 will go into this escrow, and it's technically the borrower's money. It's finance, it's not a closing cost or anything. And if anything comes up of the unknown, where once we open this wall, we have to add studs or do new electrics, but it costs $6,000, whatever it is, that will come out of the contingency reserve instead of somebody's pocket for that unknown. If anything's left over in the renovation escrow account, by final inspection, it's given back to the borrower as a principal reduction. So you'll see, like, you'll have a $50,000 repair cost, then a contingency reserve, and maybe 5 inspections and permitting costs, whatever it's gonna cost to do that to a renovation. If anything's left over in that account, it's given back to your borrower as a principal reduction. So even though it's being financed and it's part of the loan, it's not our money, it's not closing costs, it's just part of the renovation cost to do.
And the extra money, if there is any money left over, you can use it in case
Yep.
they decided on something else, right?
Yep, that's the next thing I was gonna say. You say all the work is done, final inspection hasn't been completed, and the borrower says, hey, I have $5,000 here and I want to put a new bathroom, whatever, countertop in, costs $3,000. Sure. So they just do fill out a form to say, hey, we're gonna add this one repair. All of the other repairs done, we don't use the contingency, then they can use that. So it has to be done before they actually close out the entire project. So, simple as that. Well, not too confusing, hopefully not too confusing.
The 5,000 is a 50,000, 5,000.
No, so you would actually have, even though the bid was for 50,000. We're gonna put 5, technically you have $55,000 to total. And again, it's just because when most people buy a house, they don't have any money. They're done. Most people. So all of a sudden, if they have to add additional repairs, where's the money coming from?
Hey, Greg, just want to make sure that I understand and that everybody else understands.
Sure.
That contingency reserve will fluctuate based on the condition of the house. By way of example, there's no furnace, there's no running water, it's a HUD. Then now you're talking about maybe a 15%.
Sometimes, so here's the HUD rule. 10% is usually the average, the overall average, it's always going to be collected minimally on a contingency. FHA's guidelines state if the utilities are turned off at the time of the appraisal inspection, or the house is vacant, that's usually more so if utilities are turned off, then they'll collect a 15% contingency. And that's actually a plus, because in sometimes you may have a property where utilities are off. You have to get them turned on, but with renovation, you do not have to get those turned on. You can, but if you don't want to, we'll just try a 15% contingency instead. Usually, and it's not that 5% difference, unless you're doing a $300,000 renovation. It's not that much, because usually renovation on average is between a 30 and 40,000.
Right, what is their concern with that? Utilities being off, why are they collecting that?
Just because they can't test is the water running properly, is the septic running properly, or things like that. So they just kind of throw a couple extra dollars in there to help. Now, the problem, I don't want to say it's a problem, but the scare would be what happens if they find a repair that's more than what's inside that contingency reserve. And that's where you got to put our heads together. The first choice is, well, the borrower's got to pay out of pocket. What if the borrower doesn't have the money to pay out of pocket? Then we kind of start looking at the repairs that would be made or any repairs that were in the wants that were inside the transaction that we're gonna not add any value, you know, not do that repair, put it towards something that needs, and get this house up and running. Okay, so does my buyer qualify? This is actually kind of easy, and hopefully this is simple, but not everybody gets this, so I like to throw it out there. So if you have a buyer, if you go to someone and you say, I qualify my buyer, and you say, come back and say, qualify for $250,000, great. So if that buyer want to go out, find a as-is ready, normal loan for $250,000, they qualify, close it stuff. If the same borrower wanted to buy a $200,000 house, put $50,000 in renovation to it, now we got a $250,000 total acquisition, it still qualifies for that $250,000. You just can't take a borrower that qualifies for $250,000, they go find a house for $250,000, now they want to put $50,000 in it, now they got $300,000. And so it doesn't matter how you get to $250,000, that's how you get there. So what I typically suggest and do, I'm showing my age, is if you came to me normally, like, hey, I have a purchase contract for $150,000 or whatever, you know, we're gonna obviously make sure that they qualify for that. I will always go, someone was thinking renovation, how much more do they qualify for, just in case something happens that way. I actually even suggest, if you have a client who wants to buy a house and they want to put $50,000 into it, like, you know that up front, see if they qualify for $60K. I mean, we're not gonna give them a loan. At the very end, the numbers are the numbers, but at least you know if something comes up, we do have a little bit of labor to get them in.
So do they have to qualify for the contingency add-on?
That's all that inside. Yep, so it would be the two, so when I say 50,000, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. 50,000 will be your total renovation cost. Renovation, contingency, inspection, permits, title updates, all of that kind of stuff. And when we have it, when it comes down to it, you know, we break all this down, we itemize it out. I just don't want to use everybody in the room today. So down payment. These next couple slides, I just want to kind of give some examples. This comes to the misconception, it's too expensive. Your typical FHA transaction, $200,000 sales price, $300,000 would be 3.5% down would be $7,000, the minimum required amount. Say that same borrower wanted to buy the same house for $20,000 in repairs, they'd only need $700 more out of pocket. And what I say about that is that if someone wants to purchase a home, but then they have big dreams, I want to buy that house, and after I close, I want to put $20,000 into it. Well, where's your $20,000 coming from? You know, is it going to need $700? You know, what's your payment going to be? So I want to kind of just give an example that it's not as expensive as you think. This is one I just gave. You need $700 more to put $20,000 into it. You need $1,000 more basically, but $30,000, $1,400 or $40,000 if you go on and on. So like on this particular example, I want to buy this house, I need $40,000 of whatever I want to do. Well, where are you getting $40,000 and what's that going to cost you post close? You could do a renovation, finance it up front. You're only coming up with $1,400 to do it. And if you want to get more detailed information, this now, I don't know, we're interest rate on basis so don't take this as a normalcy, but it just kind of shows that, you know, normally somebody's principal and interest would be $1,126 on this $200,000 purchase. Well, if they want to put in, they want to do renovation at 20, the payment goes up $112, $168 for that, $225. So it's kind of looking at the big picture, going back to the beginning where you have a house, the borrower almost loves this house. Well, what do they need to love the house? Well, I want to redo my floors, I want to do appliances, whatever they want to do. But it costs me $40,000 to do all that. I go, great, can you come up with $1,400 extra bucks for closing and you qualify for $225 more for your payment and all kinds of things. Touch the nerve. Go ahead.
I was just curious, is there any additional cost that is in the regular mortgage to do that?
No, the only additional cost you're going to find if you're going from a regular transaction to here, outside of the normal cost of renovation, usually rates of renovation are typically higher. Not deal breaking higher though, and they change. So I can't give you exactly. Yeah, I've seen them as high as an eighth up to 3/8 depending upon.
more than a conventional.
Yeah, and again, what's all relative, yeah, so depending upon if it's FHA or conventional, just over and beyond that. And the reason being is that there's a lot more liability in renovation, depending upon lending on something that doesn't exist. How long is it gonna take them? It can take 12 months to finish the renovation, so things like that.
How long do borrowers stay in renovation on?
That's a good question. Actually, it's very common for them to refinance within 6 months after their renovations are complete.
I think that's a good point in the market today, with higher interest rates.
Especially
People
today.
to buy home, thinking that they're going to refinance at some point down the road, when the rates ultimately do come down. And so the renovation loan, yeah, the rate might be a little bit higher, but rates are high right now anyway. Even if they weren't doing a renovation loan, most likely they would be refinancing. So if you do a renovation loan, you get a little bit of higher interest rate, you throw all that equity into your property. And then when rates ultimately do come down, you can refinance, to get that payment.
There's a big example there.
And the value typically is high.
Exactly. So here's a really good example. A lot of times, especially if you say, a first time home buyer goes out, finds a foreclosure, they have automatic equity in that house, but they have no access to it yet. So I can't tell you how many FHA loan transactions I've done on a renovation project. After knowing that the bank's just dumping the house, but they can only borrow up to whatever that sales price is. So you can have, for instance, maybe it's a $200,000 sales price. Just keep the same example, it's $50,000 in renovation. The house may appraise for $300,000. That's a big schedule, but they can only borrow up to the 250 because that's, they don't own the house yet. So while the renovation is done, that same borrower, contingency reserve is given back as principal reduction. They have a high interest rate. We'll turn around, refinance them into a no MI conventional product. And it's like they won the lottery. Now all of a sudden they have $50,000 in equity. They have no MI on the product anymore. It's just a really good, easy segue to get them set. So sometimes renovation is almost like a temporary situation to a permanent solution. Good question. That's all I have. You got a question?
Now, the insurance, for a home insurance for a construction or a renovation, it depends on how much or how long your renovation's for, correct? Or the amount of work that's done.
That's actually a really good question. I didn't want to bring up today, so I don't confuse anybody, but since you asked.
But-
I'm at homeowner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you recommend the homeowner's insurance, because I've had times
Yeah.
where we couldn't find a insurance company that would provide us with the construction.
So what they do, so the question is, how do you get homeowner's insurance on a renovation loan? Say, if you've got a perfect world, hopefully an insurance company would say, yeah, we'll just give you a HO3 policy, like any normal transaction. A lot of insurance companies come back and say, nope, $50,000 for the renovation's not done yet, we can't insure it, it's not there. So what we're gonna do is make you purchase a builder's risk policy, and which may be, whatever, it could be $600, and it's good for 6 months. And hopefully your project could be done within 6 months. If it's not, they may charge you another $600 for 6 months. But what we do as a lender, we say, okay, you have to get this builder's risk policy for this particular transaction. And get us a quote on what your insurance, your premium is going to be after this work is all done. We're going to take that quote, and that's what we're going to escrow. So the builder's risk policy is going to be more expensive than your normal HO3 policy. So that way we're not going to escrow whatever the builder's risk policy is for the borrower. That could really change the ratios too. So we look at it like, hey, what's the insurance premium going to be after it's done? But what do you need to get insured for today? And most, I won't say most, there are some insurance companies that will not give you a builder's risk policy. You typically can find someone out there. Some of the big boys will step up for you. We never really had a problem. We've had problems with like a small insurance company saying we don't offer it, and they may have to, and that small insurance company can give us a quote and say, can you just give me a quote of what's going to be when they're all done? We'll get a builder's risk somewhere else, but knowing like when they're done, they can go back to that insurance company again.
Now, what if it's a two-family house and someone's already living on the first floor, and then the whole second floor is the one that needs to get renovated?
Exactly.
So does the insurance,
They're probably gonna get possibly two policies, one for that top one that we're doing the renovation on to, with the risk, but then they're gonna have a normal premium depending upon the risk with someone inside. That's advanced questions for me, they're trying to throw me off the game. Here's a good one. Did you know with renovation financing, if the house is uninhabitable through construction, the borrower can finance up to 6 mortgage payments. So that's a big one, because what happens if, hey, I own this house, or I'm paying $1,000 a month in rents, and I want to buy this house, and it's a big project, I can't live in the house for it, but I can't afford both payments. So we can finance up to 6 mortgage payments, goes into the renovation escrow, so they're still going to get their monthly bill, but the payment's made out of that, until the house is habitable. And that's, if they don't utilize it all, that's given back to the principal reduction. So we always try, I've rarely gone up to 6 payments, but it really helps them with that gap until they move in. They're kind of holding over that way. You want to ask me a question?
Yeah, structures, can they take down a structural wall?
Yep.
You're able to do that with this program?
Yeah, exactly. That's what we do.
On the $35,000?
No, so that's a good question. So there's a difference. She's asking me, what if we had, so you're referring to an FHA. And let's, before I answer that, let me explain something. Fannie Mae homes on the conventional resident, they don't care what the hell you do. They just want to make sure that the house is going to appraise for X at the very end. FHA gets a little bit tighter. So she's, if you have a structural repair, that's going to be a standard one, where a HUD consultant will be involved, no matter what the amount of money it costs. If there's any structural repairs, consultants there. A limited 203K is like a miniature version of a standard K, where repair costs, the total repair cost can't exceed 35,000. You can't go, there's no structural repair can be done at all. So in this example, you can do it, but you would have to do a standard with a consultant. And what that means is, with the limited, we don't need a consultant to go to the property. We deal directly with the contractor. It's usually repair and replace items, painting, flooring, roofing. You're not dealing with structural, load-bearing walls or anything like that. So yes, you can do that and utilize it. The uninhabitable thing is kind of funny too, because I've had clients where, half the floor will be done, like, I'll live in it, I don't care. I've other people, like, spill a can of paint, like, I can't live in that house, I want to finance 3 months payment, so. But it's an option, just in case they can't afford both through that time.
So what if the 6 months is done and the work is not done due to a contractor not getting their everything done within those 6 months? There's an extension, and then how far does an extension?
Well, they won't, they can only borrow up to 6 months, and then the borrower will be in a lot of trouble, so they got to come up with some cash.
They have to keep paying their mortgage and whatever.
But typically, the thing is uninhabitable through construction. So usually, if you're doing a renovation, even if the renovation takes 6 months, they're usually not, within a couple months in the house, you could move into the house, you're just going to be living around construction. So I've never had a situation, like no one's ever gone past that point in the time. You didn't just jinx me. And this next one, this is really big, FHA. You can use 110% factor on FHA 203K loan if that house under raises. What does that mean for you? So say for instance, we'll go back to the same example. You have a purchase price of 200,000, total renovation cost is 50,000. So we know our total acquisition cost is 250,000. What happens if that house only appraises for 240, besides everybody in the transaction panicking? We have FHA states will lend up to 96.5% of the lesser of 2 factors. You have, we take your total acquisition, that's your first factor, total acquisition, that's your first factor, 110% of the subject to value. So we're gonna take 240 times 110. So now we have 264,000. So we're gonna compare these two together. The borrower can still borrow 96.5% to 250, even though the house appraised for 240. And they do that because they know, hey, you got a 10% contingency, you have some factors that decide there, they're not going to give you any value. This is your primary residence, you're not going to buy it and flip it, you're going to be there for a while. So I've had, so basically the borrower, even if the house under appraised, still get their max financing to move into the house. I'm gonna tell you a little trick, but you didn't hear it from me, even though it's being recorded. This happens a lot, I'm not sure. I've had people come to me where it's like, hey, my borrower wants to buy this house. And they decided that they want to put some hardwood floors in, or they want some new appliances. So can we turn this over to a 2 or 3K limited product? Sure, it's ironic that the house is under appraised with the sales prices, but now we can utilize 110% factor. So you can still borrow all your money moving the house by turning into a renovation. The house presented to me is always comical in that sense, because you can't really go after it that way, but it happens. If the borrower wants to do it, that's the guideline. Happens all the time, so.
Use that FHA.
That's only FHA only, yeah, Fannie Mae's. Yep. Fannie Mae's, they don't care, they all get you 95% of that 240. You gotta figure out where you come up with the money from. The closing timeframes, this is actually a big one. I get a lot, you know, hey, I got this loan, I gotta close in 3 weeks. What are you trying to do? And what I always explain, I've used this example for years and years now. If you had say if you walk outside your own house, you turn around and you look at, you're like, man, I need to put a new roof on. Well, standing in your lawn, you can probably find a roofer that'll be at your house. The next weekend, you have a bunch of guys up there throwing a half roof on it and go on your way. What if you said, I want to put a new roof, but I want to put 1,000 square foot addition on it? Well, you're not doing that quick. You got to get plans and specs and what's it going to cost. Well, it's the same thing in the financing world. So if you had a situation where I just need a new roof because it came back on the appraisal, I probably need to change the closing date. Give me a bid, we'll turn it around really fast for you. But if they were going to put this addition on it, you know, I can underwrite a file same day. We're not blowing anything up, but how fast can contractors turn bids? How fast can an appraiser get us this subject to appraisal? So we closed a lot of loans under 30 days of renovation. I also have some loans that are sitting around for 90 days, just because we're waiting on situations like that. So what I always suggest and tell people, depending upon, that's what I'm gonna ask you, which your repairs, you know, how fast your appraisals moving, things like that. If you can get 45 to 60 days on the contract, you're probably safe. If you're not gonna hit that 60-day mark, you're not gonna find out on day 59. You're gonna find out weeks prior. There's an issue, all parties would understand. So it's kind of a moving target depending upon the situation. Shannon, Diane asked me something.
And well, it's also like the borrower too, like trying to decide what you're gonna do into your kitchen, getting that back and forth from your contractor. You know, we might put these floors in, that
Yeah.
sometimes, I mean, that can add.
Yeah.
Like a week or so, depending on the contractor,
It's
just
good.
at the beginning.
Good again, come back, good contractors to make
Yeah.
a great transaction. So I don't want me to tell you, but Shannon, we did a renovation one for Shannon.
It was great, yeah, it was really good.
Good advocate to make them commercial from.
That was the only hard part for me was the contractor.
Yeah.
Like getting the quote back to get you guys the bid. We were waiting on the bid, you know, to order the appraisal for.
Guys, we're taking
majority
that-
of the time.
That law, so make sure that they can get it to us fast, and they're also agreeing to those terms. So we'll be wrapping this up here soon, but renovation's a staple, it's not a niche. The reason I've been saying that a lot lately is people don't understand. Renovation financing has been around since the late 70s, longer than some of us have been alive. It's not going anywhere, it's been through every market, and it's a needed product. If you're not, let's say you gotta run around all of a sudden sell renovation day to day to day, but if you don't understand that the option's there, you're missing out. You probably have lost a transaction, not even realizing that you've lost transactions before. You didn't realize you could even offer it. But right here, the number one, I already went over, I'm not gonna go over it again, that is the biggest thing. You get an appraisal that comes back with repairs, you have to automatically think renovation. Even if they don't go that route, it's an option that has to go through your head to think, do we have to go down this route? So we gotta get a contractor out here. But it's usually if the seller refuses to fix it, or if the bank owner, they're not gonna do anything, that's gonna be your first move. And a lack of inventory right now. I mean, there's no inventory. So if you have a particular buyer that wants to buy in a neighborhood, and maybe there's 2 houses that are on the market that are ready to move in, great, well, there could be 8. You know, that are just, they need fixed up, that you wouldn't even pass by. Well, maybe you go take a look at one, you go renovation, want to get them in. Now you got a choice of 10 instead of 2. And this is a big one. Now, I'm actually pretty proud of it. Let me tell you, 2014, when I took this product over from primary, I sucked. we subbed, I was just like everybody out there, and a lot of our competition sucks. I'm not saying all of our competition is terrible, we're pretty, we have some friendly competitors. But just because, and I don't mean this as a bashing to any lender at all. But just because someone can offer renovation financing does not mean they should be selling it. And we learned in a really hard fashion. It took us years to bring this product in-house, to manage our own draws, deal with our own post-closing. Because you're not done at the closing table. I mean, we're married to this loan and these borrowers for 6 months, 12 months, however long it takes to get this done. So that's why primary hires someone like myself to come in and basically have a dedicated team to work with teams like Ian side by side to get it down. So it's, we felt as if that that marriage joint, that's what gets us more to the closing table a lot smoother and easier. Where it's like, I'm not taking you, you don't know me, you're not gonna give a loan to someone over across state lines to get everything done. So that's why we like to work side by side with everything. So just be careful if you have it. I get it. Somebody will come to you with the whole rocket mortgage, you know, like, I'm not gonna bash it, they do a ton of loans, but they're terrible. I mean, they just are. They are. You know, I can talk about it. So POMyRenovation.com, it's a site that we put up, we're always working on it. It's a really good resource for you, your borrowers, or anybody who wants to go, just learn a little bit about renovations. Contractors, we make them go there, just so they can understand, they can read about it, that's where the registration link is from. And other than that, that's it. Hopefully everybody we got a question? 2 questions.
So can you, if somebody wants to do an auxiliary unit dwelling, you know?
Yep.
Does a renovation loan cover that, or does it have to be attached to the house, or can it be separate?
ADUs, man, they are
Yeah.
crazy in my
You can
pipeline
use
right
this
now.
one?
Yeah, we can. We have, well, right now, they're really big in California. California's giving us $40,000 credit to people putting an ADU on. It's so expensive, no one can afford a house out there. But yes, the only difference with ADU, you use renovation for it all day long. All you gotta be careful on is that it's not considered a 2-unit property, so when you deal with county loan limits, you have just that 1 unit. Loan limit. Yeah. All day long.
So George, it's gonna be based on the town.
Yeah.
When I make the application for the ADU, whether it has to be attached, whether it's, you know, size-wise.
And the other thing too, it's directing comps. So that's one of your biggest white elephants when you're dealing with an ADU. Are there other ADUs in property? Can we find comps that full value? So that's the kind of things that you have to look at.
I think it's changed, probably.
Yeah, they're getting.
How does the mortgage process work? So you buy this property first, you do the legwork before you buy it, and, you know, people want to close.
Exactly. So you'll notice that what happens is you, so all the legwork is going on while you're going through that. You're not buying the property first. When you're buying the property, but the renovation is part of that same transaction. So it's instead of buying the property for $250 and you want to put $50,000, it's like, okay, the loan, how it works is that, okay, you have a sales price $250, renovation is $50. When you go to closing, seller takes the $250 rolls, this $50 goes into escrow, and then they start.
So it doesn't hold up the process of closing for that seller.
Nope. The only thing that, not for the seller.
Legwork, if
Yeah.
you know, getting quotes and all that stuff
Exactly.
before the closing, if that takes longer than usual.
That could take long, and that's what we
Yes.
contracted. I mean, the quotes and things up.
Right.
And that's, you have, like, in your contract, you have to disclose you're doing renovation financing. And so if it's a house that needs no work and your borrower wants to do all these things, yeah, that could help somebody out and push the seller off. If it's a house that needs work, the seller doesn't have an option, and they have to do this type of work. So you have to, you gotta get these bids, they have to be able to sell the house to anybody, I don't care, unless someone's gonna pay cash for it. That's the only way. to get it right.
And that's what you have to get like a general bid, right? Like kitchen, 30,000, counter, floor, it's not like it's extremely detailed, and then whoever's, you know, buying the house, they're just gonna have to stick within the budget, so you can, like.
So,
and-
and that's a good point. So one of the things that we do is if you had that house, you don't even know what the cost is yet.
Right.
You can say $50,000. We're gonna underwrite off of that number. It doesn't matter. That's what earlier I said, go higher, go 60,000. It doesn't matter. We're just qualifying your borrower. And to say, yeah, you can use up to 60,000 in repairs, depending upon what it comes in. If it comes in at 40, then everything's just gonna lower.
Then it comes in higher,
40.
sure.
So we can already start, yeah.
Right.
So we can already start that process well in advance. So.
Do you ever take into consideration, the neighborhood, like overbuilding or over improving for the area of the town? I mean, does that come into a factor?
Well, I don't necessarily know, it only comes to a factor depending upon really just the comp. So if someone over improved that way, you know, your appraiser's gonna come in there and kind of look at it. Say, this is what they want to do, this is all the house, these are all the comps I can find, the adjustments I can do.
Just put in, I talk about a couple of things that you brought up. 110% is nice. In your experience, how often do you think new property is under appraised? My experience, you're normally getting a lot of equity out of it because that house is depressed, it's like why they're going after it. So your personal experienced family member buys around, 15, puts 20 in, appraises for 285.
I always find that,
235 total, total in, he's getting $50,000 of equity right there.
exactly.
Years later,
So,
refi,
it's the needs and your wants. You
Yeah.
have a house that needs a lot of work, you're usually getting that house way undervalued. What it is cost for at that point, because you're doing renovation. But if you had a house that the bar loves and wants to do all these things, it's a real risk, and you're gonna come in, you're gonna appraise on that particular
and a
house.
lot of people you're helping your family and friends, of course, you want them to put equity, because they're gonna come back to you, instead of having 3.5% down, they're now 15, 20+% in their current house, then flip around into their second home.
Exactly.
But another thing, because I've done a lot of renovations over the years. A lot of people come in looking for land loans, and of course. For the most part, say you guys would probably rather sell a house than a piece of land. Around here, we don't have a lot of land available. Every time somebody calls and they own land loan, or what we'll do, blah, blah, blah. A lot of times there is negative equity in the new construction because of the cost. Versus land loan, or versus looking after renovation, which now, correct me if I'm wrong, with 700,000, with the new limits, is that what we're gonna be able to borrow for?
I don't even know what you're
For me?
Yeah, that's another thing, so the difference between the home style and the FHA loan is the loan limit and the guidelines, right? So if you form a loan limit and you're getting kind of 700,000, a lot of people think like, oh, you can't do a big project with a community, right? And it that's it. I mean, the renovation loans we're doing now are big, you have people buying a distressed home and putting lots of money into these properties to make exactly what they want. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the project on State Street. Yeah. Yeah, so that's our project there. That's almost $300,000 renovation that they're doing.
That has
been empty for 30 years.
Yeah. But so when you get these people looking, I've got on calls for land loans, but there's not a lot of good lots available because most of it's taken around here. One new construction, but there's a lot of times negative equity because of the cost of new construction and the unknowns. So construction. Well, $700,000 loan limits, conforming loans. I don't think people think I can get into a 500, 600, and get my $800,000, $900,000 house in a mature neighborhood. It's a really good option that people don't think about because they say they want new construction. But over the years, I've told people, go find that lot, but you want a neighborhood, you should probably be looking at that ugly house or somebody else in our neighborhood.
A lot of the legwork that we do up front, a lot of times, so you just give us, this is what the house costs, this is what we think we're gonna put renovation into it, and we'll do all the math and say, we'll come back to you as a realtor, be like, we can do the transaction, but this house has the praise for X. Do you think, are there comps in that area? Do you think you're fine? So in situations where if there already is immediate equity built into it, like you're already ahead of that particular game, so it's smart.
But it'd be a lot better to sell that $700,000 house that subject to completion will appraise for 900 than that $150,000, $200,000 lot. That's gonna cost another 7 to build and worth 750, 800 at the end.
Yeah.
For your buyers that aren't thinking that.
That's good stuff.
What's that?
No problem.
Yeah.
Just, and maybe I stepped out for a second, but along the lines of the renovation products. You kind of talked about, hey, the tenant had a CEO on it previously, where it qualified for the renovation, but along the lines of a lot of people buying distressed properties, can you knock that down and build it?
Yes and no. Tear downs have been a big thing lately. You asked me 3 years ago, yeah, we've torn down all day long. So we try to deter against a full tear down because they say, that's too construction, you're just not making the foundation. But if you're not tearing the whole thing down, you know what I mean? It's, you do have some walls up, you are keeping some. Yeah. Like, there's ways to get around that. And that actually just sparked a quick idea I didn't even mention on these slides. What happens to spec homes? There's a lot of times where a builder start a transaction, the CEO's out, oh, they run out of money, what can you do? Not with the 203K, but with the Fannie Mae home style, your borrower can go into that house, buy it and finish it with a renovation product. You get certificate of occupancy off of that. A lot of builders run out of money these days. So that's been a pretty big.
And then one last question, can you change the footprint?
Yes, yep. I'll do that.
Both FHA and conventional?
Yep, yeah, so if it's FHA, you have to go with the standard.
Yeah.
Conventional. The Fannie Mae literally, they don't care what you do. You put a pool in, fence, big garden, plant a big oak tree, they don't care, as long as that house appraises for what it needs appraised for at the very end.
Abatements for asbestos, flooring,
Yep.
tile, that kind of thing,
Yeah,
that all taken care of.
yeah, but that, they're actually big, they're the kind of, we get this appraisal back, you know, they have asbestos, or mold, or termites, things like that.
You know, also on that too, like, you don't know how many times you've shown houses where they're like, oh, I love the house, but I want a 2-car garage, or, you know, I wanted to finish, you know, bonus room, you know, but I love the neighborhood, but it just doesn't have everything. I mean, you know, that's a great opportunity to talk about a renovation. 2-car garage, 3-car garage, you know, in addition, give that borrower everything they want, in the location they want, and do it via a renovation loan.
Not as expensive as they actually think it is.
And you also think this is what everyone understands, so Greg's team does all of the back end stuff for us, so, you know, during the application process, it's still through our sales team here in Guilford, we meet with borrowers, we do the full application. So from your client standpoint, nothing's really different, it's just who underwrite that loan on the back end for us. So on our conventional or FHA loans, we have our own dedicated underwriter that allows us to control the process, turn things quickly. So if it's a renovation loan, we do all that same stuff, except we don't upload that to our in-house underwriter. We upload it to Greg's team, and they work with us and the borrower to get it.
You guys have your own dedicated underwriters.
Yep,
who work
yeah,
with
so
the
we
same-
underwrite,
same underwriter.
close, fund, deal and manage those closed drawers.
In order for the borrower to get approved for the renovation loan, does the contractor's plan have to be approved by you? They're trying to borrow $200,000 house. They're asking $50,000, but you're looking at it saying, this house is going to be $150,000.
So that would go through process, meaning that in the very beginning, like we start with a raw number, we just make it up, we don't know what it is, we try to get it, hopefully we get as close as possible, that really comes from you guys, borrowing, like, what do you think? And that's what we'll start underwriting. We gotta get the plans and specs, typically before we order the appraisal, because the appraiser needs to know what the scope of work is. The appraisal is the magic document, because that is the all tell all, if you may have, hey, I want to do this, give me a subject to appraisal and needs. Now all of a sudden, it's like, all right, this is your value, but we're also going to add these repairs. So we need to add that to the particular bid, and that's where it comes together. So typically, that's the hardest part about renovation. You had a 75% through the process before you really know what your final loan amount is, because you don't know, can't predict the future. I don't know exactly everything that's going to be called out on these particular properties, but so, and it's not hard. I mean, it's like, not hard to us, because we deal with it every day. Some people get stressed out, like, oh my God, I don't know. And that's why, again, I say, they say 50, well, fine, on 60. Just in case something else comes, we need to know that the borrower qualified, we just gotta add it. Okay. Are you ready?
So what it sounds like to me, like I have clients whose children are now coming into the market as investments in this, and they're looking at $200,000-$300,000 home and renovation and stuff like that. And that sounds like it's perfect, because it really doesn't sound like it works with the 600, 800 home, because they're limited.
Sometimes the limits, yeah. So we didn't go over county loan limits. What it basically means is, I'm getting right back to that. So what's the FHA limit here now? Going to be, you know,
420,
Fannie Mae is like 7.
420,000.
Gotcha. Fannie Mae is
For
7.
FHA, you go to 420,000. That's the loan, not the purchase price. And for conventional, now it's 700.
Exactly.
Will be so.
We'll be on our 7th.
Yeah, and then it will go up to 17.
So basically, you can do just say if you had a $500,000 sales price and you're gonna do $300,000 renovations, $800,000 total acquisition. Well, we only go up to a loan amount of $717,000 in there. They would need that additional money there, so anything under that.
Yeah.
Yes, but you can do with the renovation loan with conventional, you can do 5% down. Maybe 3%.
Again, first time home buyers, as long as it's, yeah, you can't go jumbo, as long as it's in high balance, you need 3%. Now, you did mention investments, so investment property, you want to go to 85%, and it's limited to a 1-unit property. Can't do multifamily. And actually, speaking of multifamily, that's pretty big too. A lot of these first time home buyers, I want to buy a 3-unit property, I'm gonna live in unit 1, I'm gonna rent out the other 2. You can utilize that, we can utilize future rent. Going forward, they got to pay for self-sufficiency.
Only on the Fannie Mae.
For sure. Say again?
Only on Fannie Mae or FHA too.
I'm not sure you can do self-sufficiency, right? No, I'm sorry, no, FHA can do it for you. You can take a 1-unit property and make it 4 units, or a 4-unit property and make it a 1-unit. So you can add these units if you want to do renovation.
We're getting more calls on that now. I think just because the cost is so high for first-time home buyers, they're asking, what would do renovation, or get a single family, can we turn it into a 2-family, for income, or vice versa? Those questions are coming up a lot more
Yeah.
now than they have in the
What
past.
about a mixed use?
I wish for you to do. I'm trying to get it better. Oh, yeah, some areas, like, well, I'm from Baltimore area, with a zillion mixed use properties through there, so. They took it away about 6 years ago, and it was a bummer. I don't know anyone that doesn't.
I was just saying that I did $1 million property with an FHA loan because they had cash, but they had a foreclosure.
Okay.
And so they didn't have to wait the full number of years to be able to switch them to an FHA
Yeah.
and still qualify for it. So if you have someone who has crappy credit and only qualifies for FHA, but has cash, you can always go higher. So you can play with it.
Yeah.
Put the puzzle together. Well, you guys have more questions? You've been great, man. I love the feedback. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to groups and it's like.
Not this group.
Yeah. Well, in the meantime, if something pops up, after this, you'll feel free to reach out to Ian and his team, ask any questions. And we're here for you.
Right.
Renovation loans, but we just, and this doesn't have to do great, but we also have a new construction program that we're rolled out, so that's fairly new to us. I just want to let you guys know that Greg and his team handle all the renovation stuff for us. We also have a real new construction program. We also have a one-time close, which is new construction for FHA, for VA, and for USDA now. So they can acquire the land, come up with the plans to build a house, and we can do the financing for those types of properties still. So we appreciate you guys coming. Thanks for Greg coming up from Maryland and chatting with us for a little bit. Talk to the sales team if you have any questions, and hope everyone has a great day. So thank you very much. All right. Great.
Right, girl.